Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Apprentice Room Podcast, where we are joined here by a special guest who's been an insurance apprentice for a very, very long time, coming to the end of his program. Would you just like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. My name's Danial Badshah. I started an apprenticeship in September 2024 at the world's leading insurance marketplace. And today I'm joined by Joel to discuss a few bits in relation to my journey, exit opportunities, a bit more about content creation, and it's pretty much that.
Yep, let's get right into it. Thank you so much for coming today. We'll just start by touching upon your journey, starting from sixth form when you finished your GCSEs. How was it? How did you do in your GCSEs? Were you always ready for this route, or was it, not really a typical journey?
Yeah, so I think, which is not quite traditional for me, I was fixated on doing an apprenticeship from the GCSE period, so from essentially from the get-go. And that is because I had a few people mentioning it to me, and from that point I was like, okay, although it's a bit early, let me just plan ahead. So I did a bit of research into what apprenticeships are, the different types, so like level 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. I researched the benefits about doing an apprenticeship, such as getting a fully funded qualification, more importantly the experience, long-term exit opportunities. So I thought, okay, this is something that I'm going to consider. It's at the top of my head. I couldn't entirely say that I'm going to do this definitely because I was only in GCSE. So then I proceeded to get into A-levels, and during my first year of A-levels, in the first year of summer, I did some sort of work experience at the Big Four.
Nice.
And ultimately this work experience reassured me that I'm willing to get into corporate straight away. I'm willing to get into the deep end, despite the sort of negative stigmas that were associated with doing an apprenticeship, such as it's for those that are academically inferior, for those that potentially didn't get the best grades, which is absolutely not true, because if you look at the top investment banks, they're demanding easily A's, but easily. So for me, I did the work experience, and that, like I said, confirmed my passion for wanting to do an apprenticeship. So now, starting the second year of A-levels, I had my CV on point before I even started the year. So in the summer, I got my CV on point. And the beauty of it was because I recently did the work experience and they seconded me to a private equity firm.
It's amazing.
That was just not a problem. Had the CV on point. And the biggest risk that I took, which I'm always grateful for, was that I didn't apply to university at all.
Wow.
And that was externally, it didn't look the best, because everyone was telling me, why would you do that? Why would you take such a big risk? That means that if you don't get the apprenticeship, you're on a gap year. You've got no backup. But I looked at it in the way that if I don't apply to university, I'm not going to get lazy. I'm not going to get complacent. And as a result, I'm not going to stop till I get that offer. And that's literally what I did. And the execution went from there. So, like yourself, applied to about 50 plus apprenticeships.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think that's pretty standard. I mean, I know sometimes you'll hear people saying less is more, but given how competitive it was, and given how competitive it's only going to get going forward, I thought, okay, I need to apply to as many as possible.
Honestly,
so
yeah.
I was looking at banking, audit, insurance, consulting. Insurance wasn't the primary goal because I didn't really know much about it, but I ended up securing an apprenticeship at Lloyd's, and from there onwards, I just got straight into it, really. So that was the journey, essentially. And I think the greatest element for me was having done that work experience, which confirmed to me that, okay, I can conduct myself professionally in a corporate environment, and I can learn from people that have great depth of experiences.
Yeah, nice. And there's actually a few important things that you mentioned. Number one, the work experience, getting that work experience to get yourself used to being in a corporate environment. I think that's one of the most important things that one can do if they want to do an apprenticeship. Another important thing you mentioned was that from GCSEs, he was already looking at doing an apprenticeship, which is very different to me, because personally for me, I did my GCSEs and I was like, well, everyone goes to uni, so I'm just going to follow along and do the exact same thing as everyone else, coast along. Mm-hmm. But he started preparing from very early on. As early as year 12, I started preparing from year 12 summer. So I was already a year behind. Unlike what he did, he had the experience, he had the CV ready. For me, I was still scrambling to find that work experience in year 13, which added on to me applying to university as well. I had to apply to apprenticeships. I had to fix up my CV. I had to get my grades because I didn't really take year 12 seriously. So yeah, that's really, really good. And just to follow up that, based on how you did in your GCSEs, your A levels, would you say in hindsight that the grades you get really matter for apprenticeships, or what do you
Not
think?
at all. I think it's probably one of the biggest myths out there. I'm not saying grades are completely irrelevant. I'm saying grades are relevant to the extent where once you meet the minimum requirement that they need to get into the role, then from there onwards, what's more relevant is your experience, how you actually navigate the application process. And that is way more superior compared to just your grades itself. Because I've seen people that have got the A stars, they can get into amazing top Russell Group unis, but they can't even, unfortunately, get through an interview. And to me, that suggests that experience and conducting yourself and knowing how to liaise with people takes the win over grades. But yes, grades are important to meet the requirements, but from there onwards, it's you as a whole.
Yeah,
Well, ask me.
I completely agree. I think that grades to some extent only matter. Of course, it depends on the level of apprenticeship you're applying for. Some might have more relaxed grade requirements. You know, your level fours, they might just have C's and B's required. Whereas your degree apprenticeships or your level 6, level 7 apprenticeships, they might need a little bit higher. Maybe you're looking at getting B's, maybe some A's if you're going for like prestigious investment banks, top law firms. So yeah, I do think grades matter, but I don't think they're a definitive factor when it comes to getting the offer. I think, as you said, it's the experience. I say that only grades, you know, they help you with getting past the screening process because, of course, it says in the job description, the student must have XYZ grades, must have got grade 5 or 6 at GCSE maths, English language. I think it helps with the first stage, but after that, it's fair game for everyone else.
And I think the rationale behind companies imposing not really strenuous requirements in relation to grades is because they recognize that someone who brings A stars to the table doesn't mean that they've got technical skills in relation to managing softwares, in relation to pitching their ideas in a meeting. I don't really see the transferable element in there because grades to me are knowledge, but knowledge is not application. Application is how you apply yourself. So they're two distinctive factors, and companies recognize that, which is great because if the requirements from a grades perspective were so strenuous, then I don't think we'd see that many people having apprenticeships or completing apprenticeships till this day.
Yeah, honestly, that's true. I even think like people with A stars, like if I were a recruiter and I saw someone with straight A stars but they have no experience, and that's I see a guy of like, okay, he has an ABB, okay, maybe he didn't get straight A's but he has like a bunch of work experience. I'm gonna look at the guy with ABB. As long as he meets the requirements, boom, I'm taking him on because
100%.
then it's like he's used to function in that corporate environment. If someone with A stars, okay, maybe it shows that they're studious, they can study, maybe they'll be able to get the qualification. But what about on the job? The whole point of an apprenticeship is that most of it is on the job. Absolutely. They say there's an 80-20 split on the job, off the job studying. So I do think grades aren't as important as people might actually think. Really.
I would agree on that. Absolutely,
But yeah, really good. Let's just move on to a bit more about insurance because, you know, there's a lot of people, including myself, who don't really know what insurance is. We hear it. We hear it get slandered a lot online compared to finance. It's always compared to finance. But what actually is insurance? If you could provide like a summary of insurance broadly.
Of course. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. It might get a little bit technical, but essentially insurance is a contract between traditionally two parties, the insurer and the insured. And from each side's perspective, the insurer is promising to pay out financial compensation in the event where the client or the policyholder or the insured suffers some sort of loss. That could be any sort of catastrophic loss for which they're insured for. So it's essentially, and in exchange for that, the insured pays a premium, which is effectively the money they pay for the contract to be valid. And the purpose of insurance from a client perspective is to provide them with peace of mind that in the event where something detrimental occurs, they're going to be compensated for that, providing that it's a valid claim and it fits within their coverage. So that's the purpose of insurance. And when you look at compulsory insurances such as, you know, motor insurance, employer's liability, professional indemnity for certain professions, the rationale and the intention behind that is so that innocent victims are compensated. Otherwise, if these lines of business were not compulsory, then you'd see many different crimes occurring and you'd have many victims not compensated for a loss, you know, and that would just be unfair in society. So that's essentially the purpose of insurance. If we're being more technical, I'd like to say it facilitates a risk transfer mechanism. So it's all about managing risk, and transferring risk between two parties. That's really the purpose, if you ask me.
And just out of curiosity, does insurance work a lot of like finance? I mean, it seems like a silly question, but like, I'm genuinely just curious.
Yeah. So I think there's a tremendous misconception that insurance doesn't fall within the category of financial services. You might hear it here and then, and the reason why I think that's not true whatsoever is because insurance companies are regulated by the FCA and the PRA in the same way in which banks, asset managers, and all these other financial institutions are regulated.
Yeah.
And as you know, the FCA and the PRA are the main regulators for the financial services industry following the Financial Services and Market Act 2008. So they're regulated in the same way from a conduct perspective and from a risk and capital perspective, in the same way in which banks are. And not to mention the cross collaboration between insurers and banks is very common nowadays, as you know. So I think it's a myth. It's not as significant, but you may hear it here and then. And I think that's because it's not your traditional finance like audit, banking. It's something that there's not as much knowledge about out there, I guess.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Really insightful stuff.
Yeah.
Just, going down the rabbit hole of insurance, we know about finance qualifications, the ACA, the ACCA, CFA, CISI, all of that stuff. But what about insurance qualifications? I never hear people talk about it much on social media. So what are the insurance qualifications you can get through the apprenticeship route? How do they work? How are the exams structured, etc.?
Of course. So that's a great question. So the main governing body of insurance qualifications is a CII, Chartered Insurance Institute. So they're responsible for promoting integrity and issuing qualifications the same way you may have the ICAEW for like the ACA qualifications. So effectively you've got, it's ranging from level 3 to the level 4 to a level 6, and there's also level 7, but that's a bit more in depth for now. So traditionally how it works is you complete them chronologically. So you can't do the level 4 without the level 3. You can't do the level 6 without the level 4. So level 3 is the certificate in insurance, commonly referred to as the Cert CII. So that's pretty much just 3 multiple choice exams. It can be done anywhere between 6 months to a year. Personally, it took me about 4 months. That's just because I went at a bit more of a rapid pace. But traditionally, that's what it's going to be. And then you've got your level 4, which is the Diploma in Insurance, DIP CII. And that consists of 4 modules. And each module has 1 multiple choice exam and 10,000 words of coursework. So that's 1 module. And you do that 4 times. So that will take another a year to a year and a half. And then from there onwards, you've got the level 6, which is the ACII, the Advanced Diploma in Insurance. And that is, I believe, 5 modules, all essay based. So from there, multiple choice questions are out of the equation. So that is pretty much the sort of structure. And to complete the whole level 6, I think you're looking at anywhere between 2 to 4 years, depending on your pace, depending on your personal circumstances. But I always encourage people to do the qualifications, because the best part of the qualifications is that you gain the knowledge, and that knowledge directly relates to what you're doing or what you could be doing in your day-to-day role. So I finished the team in delegated authority, which is a particular line within insurance. And then my next module that I was studying for was on delegated authority. So I had the knowledge, and I also was able to apply the knowledge. So you're getting the best of both worlds. So that's pretty much the structure of the qualifications. Yeah,
wow, that's really useful. And I even think like similar to how like some of the stuff you're doing in like your day job applies to what you're studying. I mean, it's the same thing here. I think broadly for apprenticeships is another advantage. When you're studying, you'll actually find that what you're covering applies to what you would have done in the past or what you're about to do. For example, I do the CISI. First exam is on investments. Literally since I'm in asset management, a lot of the stuff, equities, fixed income, I was like, wow, I've been covering this on my day job. Of course, there are other like more boring modules like risk and regulation. I'm not particularly drawn to that, or I don't feel motivated to study for it. But again, some of the stuff I do on the job applies to it, which makes it a lot easier. But that's really good. And just in terms of, we're still talking about insurance, you get these qualifications, you do the apprenticeship. What about opportunities after you've done your apprenticeship, exit opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So in insurance, I think when you've started off earlier on, very early in your career and you've gone straight into insurance, I think traditionally most people stay in insurance. I had the perspective that when I started, I was just going to complete my apprenticeship and then pivot immediately into banking. But that, I don't stand by that anymore. That's because when I started the industry, I realized that there's actually a lot more to it. And it's not something that you can cancel out unless you've worked in it for at least five years in my opinion. And that's because it's just so broad that there's various different products. So in terms of exit opportunities, if you want to go into underwriting, you can climb the ranks of becoming an underwriter. So underwriting assistant, then an assistant underwriter, then an underwriter, then a senior underwriter, and then underwriting manager. So typically within 3 to 4 years, you could see yourself becoming an underwriter, depending on your pace and your knowledge and your expertise. If you want to go into broking, that's definitely an option as well. Broking is great. I think it's very fundamental in the industry. You can also go into being an actuary, and those are the real smart guys, because they do the forecasting, the modelling, the sort of the future reserving. So really and truly, you can go into whatever. You can stay in the industry, which I pretty much do recommend. And perhaps there is an element of transitioning into banking, because I think the element that combines the two industries is managing risk. That's something that I think is mutual to both industries. So there's definitely a way of transitioning. But typically from what I've seen people come from audit or banking to the insurance industry. I haven't really seen anyone go from insurance to other sectors within finance. I'm not sure why that's the case, but that's just sort of traditionally been the case. But you can definitely move up the ranks once you complete your apprenticeship.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, I see like people in insurance, when I tend to meet people in insurance, they say they've been in the career for 5+ years, and I'm always thinking, how come people end up staying in insurance, even though at the start they're like, I didn't want to do insurance, but here I am 5 years later still in insurance. And I do think some of the roles do sound cool. Like I remember applying for an actuarial role, and I was like, well, I'm actually not built for this, because I didn't even do A-level maths, and I was trying to apply. I remember I was applying to WTW, and I got rejected at the first stage, and it was just like wow.
I think another reason why people try to actually stay in the industry is because insurance is one of the very few industries where in the city of London you'll have around 200 different insurance companies within a 5 to 10 minute proximity, and that is great because you're so interconnected with everyone else that works in the industry. So you could be walking down Lime Street or Fenchurch Street and you'll easily bump into another individual from a different company, and that's how the networking gets cracking on. So that is beautiful. You could argue it's the same with Canary Wharf, where all the banks are close by as well. But I think within insurance, there's just so many companies within a 5-minute walk, which is great.
Yeah, no, I think it's like that Bishopgate Fenchurch. I walked down there once, and I've just seen a large Lloyd's of London.
They're all over there.
I'm just like, wow. Wow, they're all, and I could just tell, these guys are all insurance, the one building. Like, I don't think there's a lot. If you work remotely in professional financial services, I don't think there's a single person who couldn't recognize the building from the outside, the little elevator and stuff.
They've kind of established a reputation,
Yeah, no, that's really good stuff. And just like, I know you touched on this at the start. It's like just a brief follow-up question. Like, if you couldn't have, if you didn't get into insurance, like, what would you say your other like career option would have been potentially?
Good question. So initially, the rationale wasn't even insurance. It was more so audit. But I think that was just due to the fact that that's all I knew. That's all the knowledge I had. So when I think of finance, I think of accounting, and potentially also banking or consulting. So for me, the sort of intention has always been to work in some sort of financial services industry. It hasn't been anything to do with, sort of tech or the law industry, and that's just due to my characteristics and expertise. But I'd probably say something to do with accounting, or if not, preferably banking. But when I say banking, I'm not just limiting it to IB. That's not the first thing we're thinking of, because hours are ridiculous, and you can't just say you want to go down that route without knowing what it entails. So that could be corporate banking, it could be commercial banking, but IB is a different discussion for another day.
Like honestly, when people tell me I want to go into investment banking, I'm just like, well, have you looked at the hours?
Do you know what it's about?
No, but the money's good. I'm just like, well, the money's good,
Yeah.
but you know, when you think about the hours you're
Yeah.
working, is it really worth it?
It's all fun and games till your mental health's alive. That's what it is, man.
It's like there are other careers, like you said, corporate banking. Like
Yeah.
literally, you could get, well, you won't get the same pay, but you'll still get
Yeah.
pretty good pay,
Yeah.
and you'll actually have a life. I mean, IB, just
Yeah.
a lot of times you're working on weekends. Like there's a colleague in my team that
Yeah.
used to work in IB, and
Yeah.
she said minimum of 2 weekends per month she was working.
No way.
It's just like,
Yeah,
how
that's
can
crazy.
people
That
live
is
like
ridiculous.
that? It's just insane.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it's just, you know, you can go for these prestigious roles, but there is a trade-off, which is your work-life balance, you know. You'll be going home and then you'll be logging on again. And that is the routine. I mean, if you're built for it, go ahead. I can't really put anyone off from it, but just know what it entails.
Yeah, for sure. And just on that, you know, we've segued nicely into like extracurriculars and stuff, you know. Unlike working in investment banking,
Yeah.
you know, you have insurance, you have other careers that give you that opportunity to go and pursue extracurriculars after your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
So just on that, how have you managed to balance, you know, your extracurriculars after, you know, your 9 to 5, you know,
Yeah.
doing your 5 to 9 stuff, whether that be gym, fitness, or
Yeah.
just other side hustles?
So I think it's really having an awareness of your day in advance. That's what I personally do. So I tailor my priorities to my day. So for example, if I know I'm working from home on a particular day, I'll just get the gym out of the way in the morning, like 7 a.m. I'll go tick it off, boom. Then I can carry on with my work, and then I have the rest of the day to do whatever else I need to do. Whereas I know if I've got a day where I'm in the office, then I know that I'm going to be going gym after work when it's all busy and packed. So I guess it's all about understanding your priorities and then allocating them strategically throughout the day. That's just as simple as that. Knowing what you need to do and then choosing when you're going to slot in what needs to be done, you know. So essentially just working around your day. That's the best way I see it, you know, because we can all say that we're busy and we haven't got time, but are you really trying to make the time for what's important, you know? Whether that's waking up a little bit earlier or something like that, you know?
Yeah, no, completely agree. I remember when I first started going gym and I was just thinking, but man, I don't have time. Like,
Yeah.
But honestly, most of the time I spend at home is just, you know, scrolling on my
Yeah,
phone,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
just realized that actually I do have time. I'm just being a bit lazy.
100%.
And I find like doing these extracurriculars actually helps with your mental health. Like before gym, I'm not gonna lie, after work I'd come home and I'd just be like, oh man,
I know what you mean.
I'm just not doing anything after work. Like
Yeah.
my life is just work and there's nothing
Yeah.
else to it.
That's it.
And I started going gym and it's like, you know, I'm actually doing something else now.
Yeah.
You know, gym is like phones off, I'm not scrolling, I'm just doing my workout.
Yeah.
It's nice. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, people say it is a discipline thing. Yeah, it's a discipline
Mhm.
thing, but like I actually do enjoy going. I'm only 3 months in, and even like other things like going on runs. Like
Yeah.
started getting into running a few months ago as well. I tried to do it twice a week, and it's just like it's nice to go on runs
Yeah.
and, you know, run through nature,
Yeah.
appreciate life. Like it's just other things that you should be doing outside
Yeah.
of work rather than just
Yeah.
9 to 5, get home and I'm thinking about work
Yeah.
for the whole night before I go to sleep, wake up, work,
Yeah.
and then repeat.
I think you just got to look at it from the perspective that if I've got nothing going on after work, then you're just living in the mindset where it's work, come home. That's your routine. And that's not good, because then what else have you got to look forward to, you know? It's just going to get a bit repetitive, and with that comes a bit of boredom as well.
Exactly. You know,
Yeah.
just another follow-up question, you know, oftentimes, you know, when you start an apprenticeship, it's like a shock to your system because you're
Mhm.
going from, you know, I've got school, I can afford to wake up a little bit
Yeah,
late,
yeah.
you know, come home at like 3, 4,
Yeah.
do what I want. You know, how did starting an apprenticeship kind of like force you to change your routine? Like, how did it force you to basically adapt?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I started, I had to remind myself that I'm no longer in an informal environment. I'm in a professional environment where we have to conduct ourselves in a certain manner. That's just the standard in corporate. So for me, it was leveraging what I'm surrounded by. If I'm seeing a certain standard being represented within the team, whether that's like, to be a bit harsh, lunch at desk, or whether that's, you know, like when they're working, they're strictly working, but when they're having fun, they're socializing a bit more. So I see the standard in the team, and that culture will vary per team. And I try to replicate it to an extent, because that's how you're going to best get along with your colleagues. If you're trying to dig a completely separate hole, then you're not going to be able to be as productive with them. So for me, I agree in the sense that it's a bit of a challenge initially, because you're just completely switching and you're having to adapt. But I think you just got to remind yourself that this is why you're here, this is why you went through the application process, and this is why the company is investing in you ultimately. So having that accountability is just the main thing for me.
Yeah, and there's something really good that you mentioned about watching what your team kind of does, trying to imitate slightly their mannerisms and whatnot. I actually spoke about this another day, like how important it is to observe your team. What are they doing? When are they coming in? When might they leave, or when might the first person leave, so that you don't look like the earliest. Being the earliest to leave is probably like one of the worst things you could do.
I feel you,
Maybe it depends on how late you're leaving, but I remember when I first started, and I was like, oh man, I gotta wake up at 6 a.m. and I gotta get ready and get into London, like clock in by 8 a.m. and it's just like, man, it's insane. But after a few months, I was like, you know what, this isn't so bad.
It's not bad,
Even I used to look at my team and I was like, damn, they're still here and it's after 5. What am I doing here? Like, no one's left yet. And I'm just like, oh man. But as my responsibilities picked up, I'm like, you know what, I see why you guys are here after 5 now. The work is actually like, it's not something you can do in a few hours and just be like, let me just chill the rest of the day.
And I think for anyone that's going into an apprenticeship and they may struggle with adapting, best thing is to just communicate openly with your manager or anyone in your team. Let them know your circumstances. Let them know this is how you like to do things, and if they're comfortable with that, and see how you guys can then therefore get along with that approach and see the differences and how you can close those differences together. Because chances are, like most likely, people are going to understand that we've transitioned from an informal environment to corporate, so they will understand where we're coming from to an extent. Whereas if you're maybe 2-3 years into your apprenticeship, I think it's a different situation. You kind of you should have an understanding of what's going on. But in the early stages, best thing is to just communicate you openly and let them know.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is not speak up, especially in your first year. The first thing I did was tell my line manager, well, I actually commute from outside of London, so maybe coming in at 8 a.m. might be a bit of a challenge, but I'll try anyways. And to be honest, for the first 3 months I was doing it, then train delays, and I was like, guys, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do the 8 a.m. thing. I could come in 20 minutes after, but and they were fine with that, because I told them in advance, guys, I'm commuting from outside. You know how it is. Like, it's really peak.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, fine. Like, you can do that as long as you're here on time. As long as you get in, you sit down, you work. I think when you fail to communicate, like, that's how you set yourself up for failure in the future. Because it's like, if you're then coming in late consistently, and they're just thinking, why is he always? He's here an hour later than his team and he hasn't said anything. Yeah. They're just going to think that you're not organized. They won't know about your circumstances.
I mean, at the end of the day, sorry to cut you off. People can't really read minds. They're not going to understand your situation unless you clearly express yourself. And the best person to do that is just your line manager. So have a chat with them. Put some time in a diary, and let them know. Or if not, even better, put it in writing as well. So you can always refer back to it in the future if needed.
Yeah, really good. And let's move on to another topic that I think a lot of people have been curious about. That's, the realm of content creation. We see people talk about content creation online. There are lots of different takes flying up in the air. But first question I'd like to ask is, how has content creation benefited you in terms of starting your journey, documenting your career? Because even before I started content, I saw you around, posting. I was like, wow, this is good stuff. One of the senior content creators. I like to think of you as one of the founding fathers of content creation in the apprentice space. How's that benefited you?
I think the greatest benefit for me is the ability to build and therefore leverage my personal brand. And the beauty of that is your personal brand is your identity. It's something that can't be taken away from you. It's your individual effort. So the beauty of that is that I think it can just open countless doors for you at any point whatsoever. Ultimately, it comes down to your intention as to why you're creating content. For me, it's not about the followers, the likes, the comments. I think that's all dopamine. For me, it's just about simply creating impact. Yeah. And when you create impact, in exchange for that, there's going to be some sort of opportunities that come your way, whether it's getting invited to a networking event, whether it's, creating content for, another organization online, whether it's, it could be whatever, but there will definitely be some recognition at some point, maybe 1 year down the line, 2-3 years. But it's going to open doors for you in unthinkable ways. And that's only going to happen once you remain persistent, because if you look online, you've seen other people doing it. We've seen other creators in the game,
Yeah.
and they're doing very well. And that is a testament to the fact that if they can do it, so can we, providing that your intention is on point. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, when I started content, I remember I started in like year 13-ish, January, February. I remember I started and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm in year 13. I thought I would do so well,
Yeah.
but then you're surprised by how much strangers will support you throughout your journey. I think that's the most encouraging thing. Like, I've been going strong for this has been just over a year since I started.
Yeah.
And like, even though, okay, I have like 1K followers or something, I don't really look at the followers. I'm just thinking, when you get those little direct messages, those DMs, and people are reaching out saying, oh, I watched your video and it really helped me get XYZ, or I secured this offer because of this, or oh my gosh, this was really useful when you spoke about this, and they have follow-up questions. Like, those are the type of things that make me the happiest when I'm posting content, and that's why I always keep on going with it.
And I think that is what ultimately reminds us of why we're doing what we're doing, and here and there I even do get people coming up to me and share a few positive words, like could just be randomly on the street, or like I'm just walking through the city, and it's a good sort of accomplishment when you get to know that someone that you don't even know is recognizing you, but more importantly benefiting from the content that you produce. And that's good, because that's our purpose, to serve people that need the knowledge that may not necessarily get access to it from school or any other sort of environment.
Yeah, exactly, agree. And just, following on from, content creation and the topic, people want to get into content once they get their apprenticeships, but people are not sure of what they should post, how they should post, what are, let's just say, unspoken rules when it comes to creating content within the apprenticeship space.
That is a very, very important point. I think, firstly, be mindful of what you're posting. I believe you should keep your work life and your personal life, which is content creation, two separate things. Just to prevent you from any sort of issues in the long run. I keep them as two separate sort of entities, if you want to put it as that. And obviously don't put out any negative opinions there. And also be mindful of what you're saying, in the sense that you don't want to be liable for someone else's loss. So if you've made a video giving advice on something, and someone has like entirely relied on that, just because you've directed them in a certain way, then you might end up being liable. So being mindful of how you articulate yourself, being mindful that what you say is strictly your opinion and not anyone else's opinion, and more importantly, just not tarnishing anyone. Simply as that.
Yeah. Like I like to say when I post, think of this as guidance, not advice. This is it's just a bit of guidance. It's just my opinion before anyone goes and relies on my advice, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, I watched your video and I didn't." Just like, like, and even like on top of that, when people ask me about, like, I want to start content, what should I post? What shouldn't I post? Sometimes I'm just like, honestly, it depends on how you want your personal brand to look. Generally, I like to bucket content creators in like maybe 3 categories. You have, people that are more on like the apprenticeship, like studies sort of side, they're giving all the information about studying and the apprenticeships, like advice for securing one. And you have like the more lifestyle content creators, the ones that like, here are the benefits of doing an apprenticeship. I went on holiday here and I did this and I did that, and all the cool vlogs and stuff. And then there's people who are more in like the hybrid sort of space, doing a little bit of both depending on what's trendy. So generally when people message me, I'm just like, it depends on what bucket you want to fall into. I do think that either one is completely fine. Of course, you do have to check your company's social media policy. Of course. Some companies are strict, like mine. I mean, if I ever mention my firm, like, HR's gonna hunt me down. So I try not to mention my firm, mention my role, or what I do in too much detail and things like that. Some companies are like, we really encourage you to mention the company's name and really encourage you to post. So it just depends.
No, I agree, absolutely. You just got to be mindful and make sure you're not tarnishing anyone. But from your experience, what would you say is the biggest barrier for people trying to get into content creation but they don't actually take that first step?
I think it's fear of perception. I think people who want to start content, are really scared about, what I post this, what are other people gonna
Yeah,
think about me?
yeah.
Or people in my area might think it's cringe when I start,
Hmm.
and I'm just like, well, that's what always happens. Like when I started content, people are like, oh, how's your
Hmm.
little content creation journey
Yeah,
going?
yeah,
I'm just like, well, it's going fine.
yeah.
Like now those same people are like, oh, I remember when you first started and blah blah blah, and like,
Hmm.
people always end up switching up. Even with LinkedIn, the same thing. When I started LinkedIn, I remember people in my school were like, "Oh, like, what are you doing LinkedIn? It's a waste of time. You're going to all these events.
Hmm.
Like, there's no benefit." The moment I secured an apprenticeship,
Yeah,
it's like they flipped to like, "Oh, I should have done what you did. I
yeah.
should have went to events with you. I should have been as switched on as you." And
Hmm.
it's just like, you might not see the
Yeah,
benefits immediately, but over time, you'll start
yeah,
to amass more followers. You'll
yeah.
start to get a little audience. You'll start to get people messaging you,
Hmm.
asking for your LinkedIn to ask you questions and
Yeah,
things like that. I
yeah,
just think fear of perception is probably the
yeah,
biggest thing. And once you like erase that mindset of, oh, this person's gonna think I'm weird if I start
yeah.
posting this. Like honestly, you're trying to help other people, and I don't
Hmm.
think people should like shame or judge people for
Yeah.
trying to do that. So
Yeah, no, I 100% agree that I think from my experience anyway, as I see the biggest barrier is, like you said, fear of perception, the fear of being judged in a negative way. But once you can learn to or master the art of eliminating that noise and disregarding the fact that people are going to see you in a negative way, then you're unstoppable, because once you reap the rewards or the fruits of your labor, then those same negative opinions are going to transition into positive ones,
yeah.
and you're going to get people reaching out to you. So block out the noise as long as you can, and then it'll get to a point where you've done what you wanted to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
facts. Yeah, really good. And just last few questions
Yeah,
before we wrap up.
of course.
You've been an apprentice since 2024, which means you've been an apprentice for a very, very long
Yeah,
time. What advice would you give, just general advice or maybe a gem,
yeah,
to any incoming apprentices, first of all?
yeah, of course. So I once read this quote that said, "You only get in life what you have the courage to ask for," and I read that twice. Like, I'll say it
Wow.
again. Actually, you only get in life what you have the courage to ask for. So when I incorporated that from every perspective of life, in any way possible, not just in relation to apprenticeship itself, that opened countless doors that I didn't even know existed.
Wow.
And if I were to tailor that to, say, aspiring apprentices, what that is effectively saying is that your success to a great extent is dependent on your ability to get out there and communicate your needs effectively. So, for example, in a working environment, there's some sort of task that has been assigned. Get out there, put yourself forward for leading that project or
Mm.
leading that task, and you only get that opportunity if you ask, whereas if you stay silent, no one's just going to voluntarily nominate you unless like you're an exception. So
Yeah.
I think I stand by that quote every single time, and when you actually incorporate it, you'll be surprised to see how beneficial it can be.
Oh,
So that's the main catch for me. Yeah.
that is amazing. Like that quote, I
Yeah.
think I might have to write that down myself after this episode. That is really good.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Like as an apprentice, the biggest thing that's benefited me is just speaking up and asking
Yeah.
for these opportunities. Asking, can I do this? Or can you teach me this? Can you sit down with me for 30 minutes? I just have a few questions I want to ask. You only get what you ask for, exactly as that quote says.
100%.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to speak to senior managers or senior directors if I didn't go over to them and ask them,
Hmm.
or introduce myself and say, hey, I'm an apprentice. And the thing is with being an apprentice, it's like it's kind of like a special bubble around you. You're the only apprentice there.
Hmm.
When you ask people, they're like, oh, he's an apprentice, so they feel more inclined
Hmm.
to help you naturally, because you're younger in your career, you're more keen, you're showing eagerness
Yeah.
straight away. Whereas if you're like, I don't know, you're now 4 or 5 years into your career and you're
Hmm.
only now just asking a director, hey, I'm 5 years into my career, can you sit down with me and have
Hmm.
a few questions? Yeah, they might still
Hmm.
help, but like they might not put their heart into it, or they might just think,
Yeah.
he's 5 years into his career,
Yeah.
what's he been doing
Yeah.
this whole time? So it's just all about that initiative.
Yeah,
I think.
100%. The way I see it is the vast majority of, like, say, even conflicting opinions, even if it's in a positive way, can always in most cases be resolved just from communication.
Mm.
That is a core principle, because without that open and honest dialogue, you're not going to get places. You can't get AI to speak on your behalf. So you're just going to have to be able to articulate your needs and equally understand the views and perspectives of the other party, and you align. Simple as that.
Oh, really good.
Yeah.
And just one final question,
Yeah.
you know, for people in school looking to prepare, should they start from year 12 or should they start even earlier than that or even later than that? What do you think?
So I think it's hard to give a precise answer because there really isn't, a precise time. I wouldn't say you need to be like me and, look at it from GCSEs. But I think given how competitive things are becoming, the earlier the better. The earlier you start, the more it's going to work in your favour. And that's because you're going to be well equipped with the knowledge in advance so that when you get to the application process, it's not a surprise for you. When you do your first few interviews, you may have some success or you may know what to expect. So really, really research the application process. And to an extent also be delusional. Whether that's preparing for an interview by talking to yourself in front of a mirror. Be delusional because that is what's going to give you the success, the ultimate goal that you want. So just make sure you start early. I would recommend that. Not necessary, but if you don't start early, someone else will.
Yeah, that's really, really true. I do think that in hindsight, I wish I didn't start in year 13.
Yeah.
When I downloaded LinkedIn in year 12 summer and I was seeing what everyone else is doing, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind.
Yeah.
People are doing paid work experience, and in year 12 summer, I was just sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. I'd say in hindsight, like the best thing you can do. I mean, year 11 sometimes ask me, how can I prepare from year 11? I'm just like, well, I don't know because I wasn't even thinking about it back then. But I'd say the best thing you can do is just get yourself a good set of GCSEs.
Yeah.
If you're really looking for top companies, try get a good set of, especially in maths, English, try get grade 7s. That's all you need, to be honest. Maybe 6s will still help. In fact, I got a 6 in maths, I got a 6 in English language. I'll still be able to, I was able to apply to pretty much everything except from Goldman Sachs' FIC and equities. And I think Deutsche Bank's origination and advisory one. I'd say other than that, like get yourself a good set of GCSEs. If you're in year 12 and you're looking to prepare, I'd say just focus on work experience. You have the free time in year 12. There's little to no responsibility. You're not, other than mock exams, which some people have mocks in year 12. Those determine your predicted grades. Really try and hammer in on those. Get your predicteds, because I do think predicteds do play a big part in your applications as opposed to your achieved grades. I mean, I had predicted A star, and I got like A, B, B. As soon as I got my predicted grades, I was like, yep, I can apply to everything. But I know that in the grand scheme of things, apprenticeships don't really ask for that much. So I was kind of just like,
As I understand, from just to reiterate what you said, build the foundation, which is essentially your academic foundation. Get your grades, and then be as prepared as possible for what they're going to hit you with. Because when I was applying during my time, I'm saying that as if I'm really old, but when I was applying, most companies, including the Big Four, didn't actually ask for a CV, which is crazy if you ask me. And now I think the vast majority of companies would want a CV and potentially also a cover letter. So having those stuff locked in and sorted in advance is going to save you a significant amount of time, because bearing in mind, you're not only just balancing applications, you're balancing your A-levels or, whatever other studies you're pursuing. And balancing two things is not always going to be as easy as you may understand it to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I told my mentee, like, in year 12 summer, the best thing you could do is, if you're applying to university, try and get your personal statement done. Try and, let's say, find someone who's maybe in university already, get them to help you with a personal statement if that's what it takes, and that's what it takes. Do that, get that out the way. In year 12 summer, try to prepare your CV, look at the work experience you have, go research online or ask an apprentice who's already there, what's the correct CV format, how should I articulate this experience, what should I do for this, get that cover letter or have some sort of template. I have a template that I send out to some people sometimes, and they're asking, and you can just kind of change it up based on the company and that. And then obviously, like you said, the interviewing stuff, Yeah, really hammering on that. I think for me that was my biggest weakness going into application season. I forgot how difficult interviews can be, especially the online ones.
The one-way ones.
I was really I was not used to looking at the Ring camera at the top of the
Yeah.
laptop, so I ended up looking all over the place. I'm just like, wow, why am I not getting for anything? I used to watch back my videos and think, okay, I kind of see why now I'm stuttering. I'm not even looking at the camera. So it's just those little things, brush up on those.
Yeah.
There's even like resources online. Lots of people have resources. You can even use like the official testing platforms. You have HireVue, you have Capfinity, SHL, Aon, etc., etc. They have stuff there for you to practice online assessments, interviews, etc. So in year 12 summer, the best thing you can do is get used to all of those. So when you're going into application season, nothing really shocks you other than maybe a rejection email.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, you also want to verify whether what you're getting into is actually for you, because the last thing you want is thrive to secure an offer, and then a few months in you drop out, and then you end up going to university again. And the best way to verify it, in my opinion, and though this might be difficult, is secure some sort of experience, ideally an internship or some sort of shadowing in a corporate environment. I wouldn't really recommend virtual work experience because that's not really practical in terms of actually doing something. But try get that experience, whether that's reaching out to anyone in a corporate environment or just reaching out to people on LinkedIn. But try getting some sort of experience. Yes, it's difficult, but that's going to confirm whether you're actually ready for what you're getting into.
Yeah, exactly. And for all the people who might be watching this, some experiences I would recommend if you're in year 11 going into year 12, year 12 going into year 13, you might want to look at EY Smart Futures. I wish I knew about this earlier. Unfortunately, I found out too late. It's too late to apply. Wish I did that. You might want to look at, if you're more into I'm interested in asset management, I'm interested in the buy side, you might want to look at, Apex Partners, their private equity work experience. Again, another opportunity I wish I knew about earlier, missed out on it because, I wasn't on it. And alternatively to that, there's an insight day at Ferrex Capital. You can find both of the two I just mentioned through looking at Into University's newsletter. If you go and search up Into University, search up their newsletter, subscribe to it. They drop the opportunity, I believe, every few half terms. They might drop the opportunity for that. If you're more interested in banking, then joining the Social Mobility Foundation, signing up to their program, or SEO London, really good for that. They do a few banking internships. If you're part of Social Mobility Foundation, they have their JP Morgan internship. Again, really good. If you're interested in banking, you might want to look at the brokerage. If you're into insurance and some banking, they offer some useful insight days, some useful work experience days. So I'd say and finally use the tracker. How could I forget to mention that?
Oh, that's the
Tracker, formerly known as Bristol Tracker without the E. Amazing. That was probably what carried me throughout the whole of year 12, year 13.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think you've missed a key bit there. Get the experience, track your applications, and know what you're getting into, so it's not a surprise.
Yeah, really amazing. Well, that wraps up our episode. Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
If there's anything you should take away from this, take the initiative like he did. He started from early on. He started as early as year 12. You guys should be more like him. Thank you for coming again.
No worries, man.
And that wraps up our Apprentice Room episode. If you want to see more of this, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like this video. If you think someone else finds this useful, then definitely feel free to share it. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.